Hey guys, I am the MMA Breakdown, and today we're doing predictions for UFC 205, McGregor versus Alvarez. Follow me on Twitter, my link is in the description, at MMA Breakdown 0. Also, check out my video for Tough Latin America 3 finale. There's still time. That will also be linked in the description. UFC 205, though, it's finally here. I can't wait. I'm really excited. I think on paper it's the most stacked card in UFC history, although I wouldn't say it's the biggest. For me, UFC 189 with McGregor Mendez and Lawler McDonald, as well as 194 with McGregor Aldo and Weidman Rockhold. Those title fights on each of those pairs of title fights on each of those cards, for me, just felt bigger, and in my mind will be the bigger cards in UFC history. But this, like I said, is probably the most stacked 3 title fights. I still love the card, but I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there. But yeah, starting off at women's bantamweight, Liz Carmouche versus Caitlin Chookagian. Really weird fight. You know, a UFC vet in Carmouche who's fought and lost to some top competition, but has looked pretty unimpressive in those losses. And Chookagian is coming off of her debut win over Lauren Murphy in a fight that I didn't actually think she won, but it was just kind of a very mediocre fight, back and forth clinch and striking battle. Neither fighter really gained an advantage. I just didn't think she showed much promise. Spent all of the second round on her back. Carmouche, she just does not put forth much offense in her fights anymore. Since her fights against Andrade and Ronda Rousey, which I think both were good performances. Since then, she just has not looked good. Was backed up against Alexis Davis, who no one really thinks of as a striker. Davis controlled distance in that fight for the entirety of it. Against Tate, it was back and forth grappling match. I guess that is impressive in its own right, but Carmouche still didn't get much done. And she fought Lauren Murphy as well and probably did worse than Chookagian did against her. I thought Murphy won that fight more clearly than I thought she did against Chookagian. But Carmouche was backed up, had to defend takedowns. Not an impressive performance. So I could see the younger fighter just being hungrier, having more upside. Just fighting with more aggression and vigor. I could see her edging Carmouche on the feet. But it's just hard for me to pick someone who's just coming off of their debut win against a fighter who's been in there with Rousey and Alexis Davis, Miesha Tate, and even though she hasn't looked impressive against any of them, it's not like she was dominated against Rousey, but against Davis and Tate, those were lackluster fights on both sides. So I'm going to go with Carmouche. Given that Chookagian spent all that second round on her back, I think Carmouche will out-grapple her and should just have the experience advantage, but it's a really weird fight. Carmouche has been unimpressive, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Chookagian edged her to get the decision, but I'm going to go with Carmouche by decision. At welterweight, Lyman Good versus Belal Muhammad. I'm going to take Muhammad. I think he should have the wrestling advantage. Maybe the better, kind of a more well-rounded striking game, although Good has power, and Muhammad, he was dropped by Joe Ban, I know at least once, maybe a couple times early in their fight. Muhammad should be at an athletic disadvantage, I think. Lyman Good is really heavily muscled and showed power against Andrew Craig. But before landing that knockout strike, which Craig kind of ran face first into. That was kind of an even fight, and Craig, had put him against the fence and landed some hard elbows against him. Right before that knockdown happened. And Muhammad, having that really gutsy performance against Jouban where he was dropped and down a couple rounds and came back in that third round to really pour it on Jouban and showed good boxing, kept Jouban backed up against the fence and was just landing big combinations on him. I think Muhammad has the overall, like I said, more well-rounded striking game, maybe not as much power, but it's that wrestling which he showed off against Eric Montano and Lyman Good in the preliminary fights to get into the house on Tough 19 was dominated on the mat by Ian Stevens. And Dana White was kind of bad-mouthing him, saying I think it was Bellator champ at the time, and saying that a guy who couldn't fight off of his back or defend a takedown doesn't belong in the UFC anyway. So given his struggles on the mat, I think Muhammad's going to out-wrestle him here. Very quick note, Ian Stevens, I still claim that he should get a shot in the UFC, was robbed against Roger Zapata on Tough. Zapata went on to get a couple fights in the UFC. He did jack with those opportunities. Ian Stevens should get a shot in the UFC. Anyways, taking Muhammad by decision at lightweight, Jim Miller versus Thiago Alves. This is an interesting matchup because it's Alves' debut at lightweight. Alves, should be the more dangerous striker, at least, the welterweight version of himself. Just has more tools on the feet. Miller's a solid striker, though. I underrated him going into that Lozon fight. He has been losing a step athletically for the past couple years now, but he's still a solid boxer. That was against Lozon, though. If he gets into a firefight with, or even just a straightforward kickboxing match with Alves, I don't think it will go well for Miller. But Alves, has just always kind of found a way to, mess things up when he's doing well. The Campman fight, he had Campman hurt on the feet, went for that takedown. Campman subbed him with a guillotine off of that takedown attempt. And Alves just has looked really shop-worn in his last couple of fights. Went down really easily to Condit. And Condit himself since then has looked shop-worn. At least admitted so himself against Damian Maia. And then the Jordan Meehan fight, was Meehan looked like he was going to get him out of there before Alves landed that body kick that put him down. And even against Seth Baczynski in his return fight, that was a really tough fight where he took a lot of damage, ate a lot of shots. Even for a return fight, Seth Baczynski, not a good fighter, washed out of the UFC, and he really struggled with him. Miller is just a lot more consistent, even though, he had that loss to Chiesa. Dariush really dominated him on the mat. But just given Alves's, his history of making mental errors and, getting subbed by Campman, Miller, who's a very wild submission artist and will jump on anything, and very good at finishing subs too. Has Oliveira on his resume of guys he subbed. I think he's going to get it to the ground somehow and submit Alves. So I'm going to take Miller. But if this weight class change, revitalizes Alves, makes him a new man, I could see him just totally overwhelming Miller on the feet. But Miller's been consistent, over the last couple of years, even though he falls short when he faces the up and coming guys like Chiesa and Dariush. So I'm going to take Miller by submission. All right, at middleweight, Rafael Natal versus Tim Boetsch. Kind of a fun fight. I'm going to take Natal. I think he's just more athletic and has the more diverse striking game, and that's where Boetsch has really struggled in the past several years. Starting with the CB Dalloway fight where he was outboxed and should have lost that fight. And then Tavares really dominated him on the feet before Boetsch pulled out a Hail Mary knockout in the third round. The Latez fight, they were trading shots. Boetsch got his shots in, but still ultimately, went down and got submitted. And then had a nice rebound win over Josh Saman. Got that done with the wrestling. And he might be able to get Natal down. Natal is he's a decent grappler, but I could see him getting Natal down and getting some ground and pound off. But on the feet, Natal should be more athletic, quicker. He mixes in the leg kicks with his strikes pretty well. So I'm going to go with Natal. I'm going to take him to win a decision, but Natal, he's lost to guys like Ed Herman, even though I thought he won that fight, but he gets into these slogs with guys where it's just a grinding clinch fest, and Tim Boetsch is a big guy. He can fight in the clinch. So I could see Boetsch, beating him in the clinch and, beating him in that kind of grinding fight. But I like Natal to outstrike him and be the more athletic guy. And Natal can be hit too. And Boetsch, like I said, against Tavares, had that Hail Mary knockout. Natal, he got cocky against Andrew Craig, got knocked out. Kevin Casey landed some shots on him. So Boetsch has a chance to win this, but I'm going to go with Natal. Coming off of that really competitive fight against Robert Whittaker, where I thought he was going to go down pretty easily, and he made that a tough fight. It was laying some good leg kicks on Whittaker that took a toll on him. I'm going to take Natal to win a decision. Also that Tim Kennedy knockout. So he can be knocked out, but yeah, I like Natal for a decision. At middleweight, Rashad Evans versus Tim Kennedy. Rashad Evans' debut at middleweight. Athleticism has not seemed to be his problem. It's been his chin and his striking technique, at least against Bader. Kennedy is a really scrappy fighter, very persistent wrestler, and he has power himself. But if this is a striking match, I think Evans should still have the technical advantage. Kennedy is not the technical striker that Ryan Bader is or has become. Evans still was moving well against Teixeira before he got knocked out. So Kennedy, has the power and has the aggression to just come forward and make it a brawl and catch Evans. And Evans, like I said, his problem has been his chin. But I think that's a competitive fight if it stays on the feet. But I think Kennedy will have a big advantage wrestling and against Evans, who's getting up there in age, who seems to, I said, his athleticism isn't really going away, but at least his chin is. I think that Kennedy's going to out-wrestle Evans. Evans was still put on his back by Tito Ortiz years ago. I think Kennedy will out-wrestle Rashad Evans. And for a guy who's just getting up there in age and, whose chin is going, I think that's the worst style to face, is just a grinding wrestler. And, Kennedy, has a win over Bisping. He's a good grappler. I think he's just going to put the pressure on him and really work Rashad Evans over on the mat. I like Kennedy. And Kennedy has power on the feet, knocked out Rafael Natal, got into a brawl with Romero and staggered him. So not completely, count him out on the feet, but I think if he sticks to, that relentless wrestling, I think he should be able to grind out Evans for a decision win. All right, at lightweight, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson is coming off of that very good win, very impressive knockout win over Dustin Poirier. But I think this is Nurmagomedov's fight to lose. Johnson, don't forget that this guy was completely smothered and shut down by Miles Jury, in a wrestling only fight. Reza Madadi got this guy down and submitted him. And Johnson is definitely, not the same fighter that he was back then. But he hasn't really had to fight a guy who is going to exclusively wrestle him. And Nurmagomedov is the best wrestler in maybe the whole sport. So it's just a style that Johnson hasn't proven that he can overcome since those losses. If it stays on the feet, he's definitely the more technical, the more skilled striker, and has power. Nurmagomedov is an aggressive but a sloppy and technically unrefined striker. But Nurmagomedov, even against Daryl Horcher in his return fight, even 70% Nurmagomedov is still a very good fighter and a very good wrestler. And once he got Horcher down, he completely mauled him. So I think Nurmagomedov is going to out-wrestle Johnson here without much trouble. Just go watch that Miles Jury fight and tell me if you think Johnson's going to be able to stuff takedowns against the best wrestler in the sport. So I like Nurmagomedov to grind him out, get a decision win. All right, at featherweight, last prelim, Frankie Edgar versus Jeremy Stephens. I like Edgar here. Stephens has definitely improved a lot. The win over Barao was nice and showed that he can outbox a guy for 3 rounds, a guy who a former elite fighter, former champion. He could outbox him and stuff the takedowns, keep it on the feet. But Barao is a shot fighter, and Edgar, if Aldo put in the best performance of his career against Edgar, and it was the most offensive performance of his career, and he couldn't hurt Edgar or drop him in that rematch. Stephens has the power to do it, but he has nowhere near the technique of Aldo. Either the footwork or just the striking techniques. So I think Edgar's movement, his in and out game, I think he's going to be able to stay away from the power of Stephens. Pepper him with those shots, moving in and out. Kind of a vintage Edgar performance where he's dancing around light on his feet, like he did against Penn. And Stephens has the power. Edgar can be hit. Obviously those fights against Maynard where he came back twice from taking a lot of damage. Stephens has power, but I think Edgar has shown the chin to be able to survive that. And Edgar has power himself. Had no problem knocking out Chad Mendes. Find the openings on him. So. Who's a knockout striker himself, maybe even more dangerous than Stephens or as dangerous. So, and then the wrestling, Stephens was kind of ragdolled by Dennis Bermudez in their fight, and Edgar isn't that physically imposing, but he's beaten the guys who have beaten Stephens, dominated Cub Swanson, and has a win over Charles Oliveira. But yeah, the wrestling is another aspect here. I think Edgar will be able to hit takedowns on him. I just think Edgar has a much more sophisticated striking and footwork game, and Stevens' only chance is going to be to land something big and knock him out, which could happen. But I think it's more likely that Edgar uses his in and out game, outboxes him, hits takedowns, and puts in a really well-rounded performance for a decision win. All right, on to the main card at women's bantamweight, Miesha Tate versus Raquel Pennington. I don't like this fight because I just think it's a mismatch. Pennington, is coming off of her fight against Elizabeth Phillips, where she won, but Phillips was able to control her in the clinch at times for stretches. She took her down. Pennington did get her back at the end in the third round, but I mean, that's what Tate is best at. Not to mention that she's a championship. She was a former champion. Has fought all the elite fighters in the division. And Pennington has not. Fought Holman. Everyone loves to say that Pennington, did well against Holman and should have won the decision. She still lost the fight, and she still doesn't really have an effective, striking game. She's scrappy. She's aggressive. She has good, clinch boxing, which she showed against Boetsch Correa. But, against Elizabeth Phillips, that was a sloppy striking fight. And, I mean, any kind of advantage that Phillips had against Pennington and the grappling in the clinch, that's Tate's world. And she's going to be a million times better at that than Phillips was. So I think Tate gets her down, submits her at some point. Tate is coming off of the worst fight of her life, getting destroyed by Nunes. That could definitely have an effect. Also, when she came back from the second Rousey loss and fought Carmouche. We already talked about that in this video. That was a pretty crappy fight, but I just think she's going to out-grapple Pennington. I think on the feet she's a more technically refined striker than Pennington. I mean, other than Holm, the only other woman who had success striking against Rousey. I think Tate is going to get her down and submit her. All right, at welterweight, Kelvin Gastelum versus Donald Cerrone. I'm so sad that the Lawler-Cerrone matchup couldn't have stayed on this card or stayed together. This is kind of a filler fight and does not live up to the original booking. But anyways, Gastelum versus Cerrone. I don't really see Gastelum winning it at all, really. Cerrone has looked reborn at welterweight. He's looks incredible. He looks like a better striker than he ever was at lightweight. The finishing sequence that he got story with was beautiful. He hit him into the body and landed the head kick in that combination. Just looked great against Cote, and his grappling is still great. So I think on the feet, he's just going to keep Gastelum outside. Gastelum really struggled with the length of Magny, the length and the range striking of Magny. Cerrone, when he fought Alvarez, was able to keep him on the outside. And Alvarez, I think, is a more aggressive, more effective fighter than Gastelum at closing the distance. And I think Gastelum's just kind of a bit foot slow. And Cerrone, is not. He's quick and, lands his strikes with precision and speed and power. Gastelum is, making technical developments with his striking. It was a nice performance against Hendricks, but he's not really making strides. And that fight against Magny, I think was really kind of eye-opening, and we kind of saw his ceiling there. Cerrone, not at welterweight, but lightweight has been a slow starter. Guys can blitz him like Dos Anjos did. Edson Barboza, Nate Diaz beat him just with pressure, boxing, and forward pressure. And Gastelum can do those things, but I don't think he can keep it up for 3 rounds. So yeah, I think Cerrone has this one in the bag. I don't think he's going to finish Gastelum, who's really tough, but I definitely think he will outstrike him, keep him on the outside, and win a pretty clear-cut decision. All right, at middleweight, Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero. This is, I think, a really competitive fight and a pretty compelling matchup. Romero is dangerous, but if you think about his fights, he's not. I don't think he's as dangerous as we build him up to be. His finishes come late in fights, but against Machida, he was down a couple rounds. He was losing that fight, getting outstruck early, and Machida kind of stumbled over himself like he usually does, and Romero knocked him out. Off of that stumble against Kennedy. Kennedy was really engaging him on the feet, and he even landed a hard shot on Romero, staggered him. And again, Jacare looked great in the first round. Had Jacare very hesitant and timid on the feet, but by that third round, it was Jacare who clipped him and took him down off of that shot that he wobbled Romero with. So Romero, as dangerous and as athletic as he is, he leaves himself open to getting hit in almost all of his fights. And while Weidman definitely can be hit too, I mean Vitor, almost. I don't want to say almost finished him, but had him against the ropes there a bit early. And then against Rockhold, throwing that lazy kick and getting taken down off of it and pounded out. Even though Weidman can leave himself vulnerable at times too, I think he's the more consistent fighter over several rounds, and he has good pressure boxing, good combinations, and Romero is much more of a one-shot guy, looks for the kill shot. I think Weidman can outbox, outpressure Romero, and where I really think he can challenge him is with the wrestling. All the guys that Romero has fought have been content to strike with him. The only guy who really tried to wrestle him was Brunson, who did get him down once, and Romero finished him. But that's going to be a different style. And Weidman, of course, is a great takedown artist, a great grappler. I think if he uses his boxing to close the distance, put pressure on him, use the boxing to set up the takedowns, I think Weidman can keep him guessing and just out-wrestle him and outwork him. And I do think he can finish him late. I think Weidman has the better cardio, and just as much as dangerous as Romero can be, does leave himself open. And I think Weidman can capitalize on that. And Weidman, for the most part, other than the Rockhold fight, is usually a very intelligent fighter. Game plans very well with Sarah Longo. So I think he comes in prepared and stays defensive enough to not get caught by something silly, and uses the more consistent boxing and the wrestling to get Romero down. And from there, I think he should dominate him with ground and pound and maybe open up a submission. So I'm going to take Weidman. I'm going to say by TKO. All right.
at women's strawweight, Joanna Jedrzejczyk versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I rewatched Kowalkiewicz's fight against Rose Namajunas, which was definitely her biggest win. But that fight was a lot less dominant than I remembered it being. And Namajunas actually hit her several times with clean shots. And I just felt like overall it was a very close fight, and that was reflected in the judge's decision. It was a split decision. I think there's one big area where Kowalkiewicz should have an advantage over Jedrzejczyk, and that is in the clinch. Kowalkiewicz against Namajunas locked up that tie clinch very quickly and started reeling off knees to the body very quickly. She has elbows off the clinch break. And Jedrzejczyk against Letourneau, Letourneau was pretty easily able to clinch with her and put her against the fence even after she got caught with that big kick. When Jedrzejczyk went to follow up, Letourneau just turned her and put her against the fence. And Claudia Gadelha really was able to close in on her early in their fight very effectively. Even landed shots on her as she was closing in, and was able to take her down several times in those first couple rounds. So I think that inside in the pocket, Kowalkiewicz should be able to make some things happen. Score inside the clinch. But that's just one area where I think she has the advantage. And overall, I think while Jedrzejczyk has kind of been slipping lately, not that she's a bad fighter, but I think fighters are game planning for her better and figuring her out more, like Letourneau. That was a pretty competitive fight. Gadelha, that was a competitive fight. While Jedrzejczyk hasn't been as dominant. She's not doing what she did to Andrade, to Gadelha and Letourneau. While that's the case, I still think she is a much more sound defensive fighter than Kowalkiewicz. Like I already said, Rose hit her several times hard. Kowalkiewicz has a bad habit of leaving her hands down. Jedrzejczyk's hands are always up. And just over 5 rounds, Jedrzejczyk, I think, is just a very consistent striker, both with her output and just pumping the jab. I think she's going to be able to just outstrike Kowalkiewicz, outland her. I think Kowalkiewicz will keep it relatively competitive. Like I said, scoring in the clinch, and she also uses a lot more movement than Jedrzejczyk. Jedrzejczyk is pretty flat-footed, but I don't know that it's not like Kowalkiewicz is a great outside striker, so I don't know that it'll really amount to anything. But I think Jedrzejczyk will outstrike her, will capitalize on Kowalkiewicz's poor defense, and maybe finish her in the championship rounds. And against Marcos and Heather Jo Clark, a far lower level of competition than the general level of competition that Jedrzejczyk has faced and beaten. Kowalkiewicz looked good, but didn't really do much to put either of them in danger. So not a dangerous fighter either, and I don't see her just outpointing Jedrzejczyk for 5 rounds. I mean, she couldn't really do that even against Rose. So I really like Jedrzejczyk here, especially after watching some tape on Kowalkiewicz, especially that Rose fight. I think that Jedrzejczyk really should take this one. So I'm going to take her, I don't know if by decision or late fight stoppage, but I'm taking Jedrzejczyk for sure. At welterweight, Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson. I think everyone's riding high off of Tyron Woodley's last knockout win over Robbie Lawler, where he really just had Lawler's movement figured out. He pressed him, which is something we rarely see from Woodley. Got him to bite and threw that big overhand, which was perfectly placed and timed, and knocked him out. I don't think that that's something we can expect to see again from Woodley, at least not in this matchup. Fight to fight, Woodley has just not been a consistent fighter, and it's kind of a wonder that he was able to press Lawler like that and back him up, because against McDonald and Gastelum, it was Woodley who spent the entire fight, getting backed up and circling the fence. But I think he could press Thompson, because Thompson is not a forward moving fighter. He's a counter striker, a very good one, a distance striker, but he's not put pressure on guys. He's not a guy who comes forward. So I think Woodley, could cause some problems for him there. Rory McDonald, had several instances where he was able to back up Thompson, and it looked like Thompson was really uncomfortable in those situations where he was getting cornered and had his back against the fence. And McDonald is not really someone we think of as a knockout striker, but when he was able to press Thompson, it really looked like Thompson might be in some trouble. But he was able to circle out, and if he was able to do that against McDonald, I think he'll definitely be able to do that against Woodley. Thompson, has way more sophisticated footwork than Lawler, and is just, he's great at controlling distance, has a great mastery of range. So while I think Woodley can press him, back him up, and maybe put him through a few scares, land some overhands, I think that Thompson can recover, and I think he can evade and circle out when Woodley does press him. And from there, I think it's Thompson's fight. I think he'll outpoint Woodley. Woodley also is not really a very aggressive, forward-moving fighter. I mean, he capitalizes on openings. He had those finishes of Koscheck early in Jay Huron, where he's this real terror right out of the gate. But since then, he doesn't really fight that way. And if he can't get that quick knockout against Thompson, I see Thompson just controlling range and picking him apart with all of his unorthodox kicks and his range striking. So I like Thompson here. Another thing is that Woodley could clinch, try to clinch with him and make it a grinding clinch fest, and try to wrestle with Thompson. Thompson, defended the takedown attempts very well against McDonald and Johnny Hendricks. But Woodley is really athletic and should have a strength advantage. And I think in Strikeforce, he used that game plan to beat up, I think it was Paul Daly and Jordan Meehan, clinched those guys and, really made it a war of attrition. So that's something to look out for. And also, Thompson can still be hit and dropped. Ellenberger dropped him, and Woodley definitely has the power. But just given how much he struggled against Gastelum and McDonald, just had a huge problem with range in those fights and distance. I think that he's not going to be the one pressing Thompson the entire fight, and when he does, like I said, he'll have some success. But I think Thompson really passed the test against McDonald. That was the harder test to pass than Woodley.
McDonald's a more technical striker, has a better control of range than Woodley, and Thompson. Well, it wasn't a very exciting fight. I thought it was a great performance against McDonald. So I like Thompson here to pick Woodley apart at range for the most part. I could see him getting the knockout if Woodley really opens up and gets too aggressive, because Thompson's a great counter striker, but I'm going to take Thompson by decision here. All right. And then the main event, a lightweight Eddie Alvarez versus Conor McGregor. Title fight, of course, just as the previous two fights were. I've really tried to think about this matchup. It's another very interesting matchup, a hard one to try to predict. Basically, I'm going to take McGregor because I think Alvarez is not only too hittable, but has really been outstruck and struggled with guys who have length on him, guys who are outside strikers, like Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, and that Michael Chandler fight, not an outside striker, but got hit a lot. And for someone who gets hit that much, and more so, I'm talking more so about the Chandler fights, didn't get hit as much in his UFC fights, but for a guy who gets hit that much, facing a guy like McGregor and putting yourself in harm's way that often, that much, I think it's just bound to backfire. And McGregor still has insane power. In the Diaz rematch, we saw him really buckle down and get very technical, very composed and comfortable, and he just had his way with Diaz before he gassed, dropped him. But if it's the case, like it was against Diaz, that Eddie's just too durable and he can't just be easily put away by McGregor, and McGregor gasses, then I could see a similar thing happening, at least where Eddie weathers the storm, and then he can close the distance on McGregor, and in the pocket, he's extremely explosive and should be have a big advantage over McGregor in the pocket. That sequence that he put Dos Santos away with, he was just firing away, a lot of speed and power in his strikes. And if McGregor starts to gas, then I could definitely see him putting out McGregor on the feet. And the wrestling, that's one area where I think that Alvarez, if he really sticks to a committed wrestling game plan, I think he could decision McGregor or just wear him out to the point where he's gassed and he's vulnerable late in the fight. Alvarez, I don't think, is an amazing wrestler, but I think McGregor's takedown defense is still highly questionable. Against an out-of-shape, short-notice Mendez, he was taken down easily. Did manage to get back up to his feet, but Alvarez is bigger. I think he has a deeper gas tank and will not be going for low-percentage submissions like Mendez was. So, he can... if he really sticks to a wrestling game plan, really doesn't try to strike at all with him, I could see him controlling McGregor, out grappling him. But again, you look at that Pettis fight, even where Alvarez was able to control a couple rounds with his grappling, and really dominantly. When that fight was on the feet, when that was at range, when Pettis had any space, he was just tearing up Alvarez. He was really landing on him easily. Alvarez really struggled with the length
in the Cerrone fight, other than that flurry he had in the first round. He was very flat. He was stuck on the outside of Cerrone's kicks and strikes the entire fight. And even his wrestling, while he's a strong wrestler, I mean, at least against Pettis, his ground and pound wasn't really all that devastating. He barely was able to out-wrestle, Melendez. And against Dos Anjos, Dos Anjos was in that fight. He was controlling it. Not that he hurt Alvarez at any point, but he was controlling it. And, he had his hands down, and Alvarez had his back to the fence and exploded from there and clipped Dos Anjos. It wasn't like, Eddie came out and, was easily out-wrestling him or was really dominating on the feet. So I think McGregor, especially after that Diaz rematch where, he still showed he has problems of gassing, but, he was very defensive and, really fixed what went wrong in the first fight as far as punching himself out. And he was very technical, very composed. If he fights like that against Alvarez, who's really struggled against the outside strikers, I think he should be able to knock Alvarez out within the first couple rounds. So I'm going to take McGregor. But at lightweight, at welterweight, he definitely, while he won the Diaz rematch, he doesn't have the gas to fight at welterweight. He doesn't have the power to put away a guy like Diaz, who is not an invincible fighter. Ben Henderson had dropped him several times, and Josh Thompson had finished him. At welterweight, McGregor, while he got that win over Diaz, was, that's not his weight class. At lightweight, I don't know how he'll do. It could be the case that maybe he's too small for a guy like Alvarez. Maybe he doesn't have the gas tank. Maybe a lightweight like Alvarez is still too durable for McGregor to put away. So a lot of variables. I don't know. But I am going to take McGregor. I think the basic matchup still favors him. Okay, those are my picks for UFC 205. Thank you guys for watching. Again, you can check out my predictions for Tough Latin America 3 finale. Those will be linked in the description. And follow me on Twitter at MMA Breakdown 0. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you for the next event, which I believe is, I think it was a doubleheader, Fight Night Kim versus Nelson, as well as Bader versus Little Nog. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Bye.